Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to our daily briefing. I'm joined by Tanya Mullally from EMO and Kim Griffin from Maritime Electric. To begin, we're making some steady progress to reestablish the electricity in P.E.I. Thousands more have been lit up since we last chatted, and Kim will be here to give us a more fulsome update and perhaps even some real-time numbers in the next few minutes. Over the last couple of days, as we have tried to do our assessment and triage the damage assessment, we've been asking islanders to limit their movements throughout Prince Edward Island, and I'm ever grateful for all of those islanders for their patience and understanding. Though we are in the early days of our post-Fiona and our recovery, our rebuilding stage, part of getting back to some kind of normal is just that, getting back where possible to our normal daily routines, even though we know that there is absolutely nothing normal about the situation we're living in here. So to that end, there is no longer a broad communication telling everyone to stay at home or to limit their movements, but we would continue to ask islanders to be ever mindful and gracious as hundreds of crews work to clean up and reestablish our critical communication and electrical links. There's a lot of hard work being done out there, and we're trying our very best to do it as quickly as possible through our coordinated effort. As power is being restored, we're seeing some businesses getting opened, our grocery stores, our gas stations, pharmacies, corner stores, restaurants are opening in various locations across Prince Edward Island. These are the small steps forward that are underway. And I would again remind islanders, although most of us don't need any reminding, to be ever so mindful and understanding of our so many wonderful employees and business owners who are trying hard to get open in some way, shape, or form to provide that important service that we've all come to rely on. We've been hit by something bigger than we've ever been hit with before. We're all feeling the effects of that. We're all very fragile. We're all very challenged in everything that we're doing. So just continue to be kind and gracious in all of our dealings with one another, in particular those who are working so hard to get our regular, common, everyday life links reestablished. As more power is restored in more communities along the way, more and more services and stores will begin to open, and islanders will be able to begin to patronize those stores as we always have in the past. The same process will occur for our public service. Our government has been reduced since Hurricane Fiona to an essential service basis. As our government offices are located throughout Prince Edward Island, we are dealing with much of the same challenges that each and every islander are dealing with when it comes to electricity and establishing those links. So as power is being reestablished, as our public buildings are declared safe for re-entry and for use, we will begin to see some of those services come back online. Now, we know that many islanders are still without their power. Some will not be able to get to their place of work. Some will not be able to work from home as a result, and that is totally understandable. Our reopening of government services will be very much a tapered approach based on the realities of the situation that we face. We know the challenge in getting some of our employees back to work will include for many services like childcare, which haven't yet been fully established. We know that issues with regard to childcare are further complicated when our school system isn't operational, which we have learned won't be operational for at least this week. So we will be very understanding, we will be very flexible, knowing full well that a return to full operational status is going to take some time. But we do have an obligation to begin to make the steps forward and to provide the service and programs for islanders that all islanders have come to depend on, and we will do that in a very tapered approach. But as I said before, as we have learned in each and every crisis that we've dealt with in the past number of years, the hardest steps to make are those first cautious steps that we're beginning to make now, and that process is underway, and we know that will take a little bit of time for some because we've been through a lot. While some of our businesses are getting online, we know there has been a loss and significant impact to all businesses and their employees. As we said from the outset, we will be here to help. Earlier today, Minister Thompson announced a wage subsidy program for businesses and employees. We're trying to find the fastest way to get as much money to those who are impacted into their hands as quickly as possible. Our assessment has also informed us that hundreds, perhaps thousands, of examples of damage to our infrastructure across P.E.I. Not only is that having an impact on education and other government services, it's having a dramatic impact on our primary industries of agriculture, of fisheries, of tourism, along with the damage and impacts that we're seeing to individual homes, apartment buildings, and other complexes throughout Prince Edward Island. Earlier today at the Charlottetown airport, I met with Prime Minister Trudeau. He's come to take a look at things, to get a first-hand look at the damage and to get a better understanding of what we need. I asked the Prime Minister for immediate financial supports to help islanders and island businesses to repair and rebuild as fast as possible. I shared with him some examples of the devastation, the impacts that it will have on the social, economic well-being of our province, and I also expressed a desire to have his leadership team to be flexible, to be understanding, and to be urgent in its dealings with us as we move forward in the days ahead. I've asked for a fund for this extraordinary loss and for the process not to be gummed up too much with process and bureaucracy. Minister Lawrence Macaulay and I explained in detail to the Prime Minister the many challenges facing our agriculture sector. For example, the feed corn, which wasn't quite yet finished, has been essentially devastated. We're going to try in the days ahead to pick up what we can from that, but that is much of the food that our farmers would be feeding to our animals this winter. There's impact to the soybean crop, the apple crop, and other fruit crops have been devastated. And for many of those sectors, while there is crop insurance and agri-stability programs, that won't make everybody even remotely close to whole. With COVID, with Dorian, with potato wart, we've been able to make significant changes to both of those programs and others to make them a bit more lucrative, to make them a little bit more easily accessible. But we know more resources will be needed. We're prepared to do that, and we've asked the federal government to help us as well. On top of that, there are dairy barns that have been destroyed. That's impacting our dairy sector. There are many potato storage warehouses that have been torn apart or destroyed. And with the potato harvest just around the corner, with the crop at its max in terms of what it can withstand from rain and weather, that is a big concern for our potato industry. Of course, agriculture, as all islanders know, is the biggest driver of our economy, and we need to make sure we can do everything we can as fast as we can to help those in need. I've asked the Prime Minister for help. I've asked for it to be fast. And, another issue that I raised, and not to digress about the challenges that we faced last year with potato wart, but I told the Prime Minister that in normal times, if we had a challenge with storage in Prince Edward Island for whatever reason with potato storage, we could often rely on our counterparts in New Brunswick or other jurisdictions to help store part of our product before it goes to market. But with these crazy regulations that have been inflicted upon us by CFIA, we're not able to move those products out of province because there are soil on them. You can't wash the soil off and store them because the potatoes will break down in storage. So not only are we tangled up with all of this mess, Fiona and its impacts, these silly restrictions that have been imposed on us for reasons that we can't understand could potentially have a devastating impact to our potato industry and will only continue to add to the chaos that our farmers have been dealing with. So I've asked the Prime Minister again to see whatever could be done to help us get back on track in that regard. We're going to work as hard as we can, as fast as we can to help those in the agriculture sector. I also provided an update on fisheries and the impacts, which are massive. Our fishers haven't yet finished LFA 25 fall season. Most of the boats were taken out of the water before Dorian in advance, of Fiona. I'm mixing up my hurricanes. In advance of Fiona, and now the logistical challenge of getting those boats back in the water is a little bit more dramatic than we thought, with trees down and all the other challenges that we're dealing with. Our mussel industry has been hit hard. Significant damage to the crop and the water. A lot of the mussel lines are a bit of an entangled mess right now. There's concern with spat, which is the seed for the future crop. Lots of concerns there. And as islanders know, Prince Edward Island supplies about 85% of all mussels to North America. So that's a big industry for us. Oysters as well, which has been a tremendous growth sector for our fishery and for our economy. There is significant loss, and we're going to have to need to be there with immediate help, not just from the federal government, but from the provincial government as well. Because unlike agriculture, there aren't as many or any of the crop insurance programs to the full extent that we see in the agriculture sector that are available to fisheries and aquaculture. But that industry does employ hundreds and hundreds of islanders. It feeds millions of Americans and it provides, or North Americans, and it provides millions of dollars to our island economy. So we need to be there to help, and we will be as fast as possible. Many of our wharves are damaged and destroyed, and the list goes on. The Prime Minister understands the magnitude of the damage. He was very gracious in his desire to help and to be as helpful as possible. And the immediate need from the federal government, he said to us, and he has reiterated to us, will be there, and we will work together to make our way back. So I thank the Prime Minister for his visit. But before we did depart, I did raise with the Prime Minister my desire as Premier to see a pause in the removal of the COVID exemption that has been provided by the federal government pertaining to E.I. zones in Prince Edward Island. As of yesterday, a COVID exemption ended, and we are now back to what we have come to know as the 2 E.I. zone regulation and P.E.I. And while the Prime Minister is right to suggest that the COVID plan was a temporary needed measure, I asked him to reconsider, because I don't think the time is now to make it harder for people to access EI at a time when hours may be challenged because of impacts caused by Fiona to our tourism sector, to our fishery, to our agriculture sector, and to other seasonal businesses that drives our island economy. I don't think it's fair right now for islanders to have to deal with that, having to deal with everything we're dealing with that on top. So the Prime Minister heard what I had to say, and he will take it back to his people to see if there's anything we can do to get islanders through this. But I know that's a lot to unpack here. I wanted to share the visit I had with the Prime Minister and to give an update on things from that perspective. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tanya from EMO for a daily update.
Great, thank you, Premier. So I guess my comments will be somewhat brief and short. We're day 4 post Fiona. And things are moving, as the Premier already noted, that we are making kind of incremental steps each day. And every day when we're hearing more grocery stores open and gas stations and power being restored, it's just kind of evidence that things are moving in the right direction. Our priorities, with that said, still remain as clearing roadways to allow and enable power restoration safely. And as we work through that, all that will enable is those essential services to come back up, as well as more gas stations, more grocery stores, more community services and business will be able to open their doors. Through that process, we are kind of prioritizing alongside Maritime Electric, helping them identify what those prioritized or essential services areas are, so that we can ensure that we're working in tandem on that. So as power is starting to come back, what our fire marshal has asked to share is that to please be mindful that if you happen to be in areas where your power is being about to be restored, and I know that we may not know that necessarily, but maybe go through your home and ensure that your stoves are turned off, that if you happen to have had I guess it happened in the middle of the night, you may not have your curling iron on, or that type of thing, but certainly if there was anything that might have a heat source, we want to make sure that you're unplugging or turning them off, and that's going to prevent any potential fire as that regeneration of electricity happens. I thought it might be valuable just to share a little bit about what EMO, just very briefly, what we're doing here in coordinating. At the surge, we're looking at probably about 50-some people in our office, which doesn't normally hold about 15 typically, so we're sitting on top of each other almost, but those people are representing approximately 60 different organizations, and that doesn't even include municipalities, and many of which are reaching into us remotely, maybe from outside P.E.I, from various government agencies. But some of the things that we're working coordinating is the implementation of a lot of the discussions we're talking about. Again, prioritizing critical infrastructure and the restoration for power, fuel distribution as well. We're working with all the major providers to ensure that they're getting the flow to those gas stations that are open, and then supporting those that are not to see how we can support them and get them back up in business. Grocery stores as well, working through the Retail Council to get updates constantly of the status of their stores and where they are opening and where their needs are. Reception centers through municipal affairs and through our municipalities. We're working with to try and determine where reception centers are, what their needs are, and how we can support them as well. Our Canadian Armed Forces, so we do have a liaison, 2 members here every day, and they're coordinating all the work with the military that's on the ground, assisting with debris removal. And then we have Samaritan's Purse, Ground Search and Rescue, and Team Rubicon, who are now deployed out into the communities, and they have representatives here working with our staff. So again, we're prioritizing and coordinating all their efforts. I think that will probably end my quick update, and I will hand it over to Kim to speak to Maritime Electric. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Good afternoon. Thank you, Premier, for inviting me. I guess I just wanted to start by just extending our thanks to so many people in the public service. It's absolutely incredible, the behind the scenes and the dozens and probably hundreds of people that are working on every aspect of this storm restoration, as well as with Maritime Electric. So our crews and our team sincerely thank you for that. And one truly doesn't appreciate it till you're off the street and seeing behind the scenes and seeing every single government department mobilize to try and help out their neighbours and islanders. So I've witnessed it firsthand. I wanted to provide a restoration progress update as part of this briefing today to give everyone an update. We've gone from 0 to 4,500 and then about 10,000 yesterday. And right now we've been able to restore about 21,000 customers across the island. We have 99 crews working now on Prince Edward Island, and then there's additional other people that are helping our crews, in addition to contractors, working hand in hand with the Department of Transportation, police services, as well as armed forces, et cetera, that have really been instrumental in helping our crews. As well, we are projecting that we're going to have confirmed up to 127 crews by tomorrow. I did want to mention the particular thanks to the province and to City Police in Charlottetown to help us. We understand that it has been challenging for many people on the roads, and we are asking you to continue to exercise extreme caution around our crews and just be careful. I think I mentioned it yesterday, just with not all the lights on, et cetera. We're looking for people to help us manually do stop and go, really, on the roads and highways across P.E.I. So we appreciate that in our crews. We had one crew, or more than one crew actually, telling me even things like North River Road, which would take them a couple of minutes, was taking them 45 minutes to get down. So anything we can do to improve our restoration efforts, we're doing that. We're part of the Fortis family of companies, and we have access to utilities across North America in our network, and Newfoundland Power did arrive, as well as Fortis Ontario, so we're really thankful for that. The other thing that we've also been working on is, I had mentioned yesterday about the drone and the helicopter, but we had to take the drone back up today, and just getting really good news and finalizing things, and crews are working off-road in Kensington area, doing some additional restoration that we found with the drone. The report is about 350 poles down across the island. We've fielded about 11,800 phone calls from islanders, and we've actually chatted with about 4,000 of them. We're open 24/7, and that's the beauty of P.E.I, having the chance to chat. So, and we know not everybody has mobile service. We know not everybody has access to TV, or maybe their radio is running out, or whatever. And whether they've used a ground line or a mobile to call us, we've been chatting with them. And in terms of our whole system, we have about 80% of our transmission energized. So if you remember, I kind of talked about that as an extension cord or a lifeline across the island. And about 95% of our substations are working. So what now we're doing is these feeder lines, is what we call them. If you think of them kind of as veins, into each and every one of the communities. So we've been able to restore power in parts of Montague, Commercial Road, Valleyfield, Georgetown, Pools Corner, Wood Islands, Alberton, O'Leary, Elmsdale, Wellington West, St. Eleanor's, Slemon Park, Muskogee, Albany, Augustine Cove, Borden and Crapo, Kinloch, parts of Stratford, Tea Hill, Bunbury, Manorwood Road, University, Confederation, Prince Street, Euston, King, Riverside, Charlottetown Mall, Coved, Brackley, and just partial power areas. So it's not full communities, but it continues to be pockets. So I just wanted to provide that update to anyone that wanted to hear the latest from Maritime Electric. And I did want to do a shout out as well to the many contractors, including H-Line and others from across P.E.I, working hand in hand or arm in arm with Maritime Electric, as well as we have a couple of crews from the city of Summerside as well. So it really is a group effort across the island. So I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to update Islanders.
Well, thank you, Kim, and I think that's a number that we're all happy to hear and see it growing, and especially when we break it down, we're into only day 2 of our return to service plan here. So pass along again our thanks for everyone for all their hard work. With that, we will turn our attention to some questions from our friends in the media.
Jack Moore, CTV.
Okay, so I'd like to ask, we heard how many you've gotten back, about 21,000. So how many people are without power right now, and what percentage of customers would that be?
It's about 62,000 that are without power. I'm not sure by community, but I can send you that percentage if you want it broken down by community or substation. No problem.
Okay. Second, we've been talking a lot about critical areas. That's obviously an area of focus for you guys. Are those critical areas restored yet?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I think critical areas, is that, Jack, do you want to repeat that question? You broke up there at the end, please.
Yeah, sure thing. I'm having cell issues, like
okay.
But I'm talking about the critical areas here. We say that that's been a key focus of the restoration efforts so far. Are those critical areas for the most part restored, or is there still a big focus on those?
There's still a big focus on those, as well as extending to more grocery stations, more gas stations, more potential service centers. I'm not sure if you were part of our discussion yesterday, but in P.E.I, what we've done is we've broken down our restoration efforts in 3 segments, in East, West, and Central. So we have locals in those areas that run those areas, and they have the list of key infrastructures that they look at in terms of hospitals, police, fire, essential services, first responder areas, et cetera, that they're focusing on in the largest pockets of customers at a time. So that's how they restore it by East, West, and Central, and they know their local areas as well as they know the back roads and the back country and how to get there. And so they're focusing on that, and then we do updates with them every 4 hours or so at Maritime Electric.
Excellent. Just one more. Now that power is coming back up, could you talk about how people should behave? I'm sure people have gotten used to walking over downlines and near downlines. Could you tell how people's behavior is going to have to change?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because we're still in strong restoration mode. I would probably not characterize it as power's back up yet because I think we got a ways to go here. But to your point, that's extremely important because as we start to re-energize, our crews are going ahead and trying to get all the lines and going into every community and getting them down, and in some cases through the trees. So that's been part of, you know, as the Premier said, we're kind of day 2, day 3, really. Like when you think about restoration, we're, you know, day 2. I don't want to throw numbers around to be different days than anybody around the table, but, you know, just in terms of how we're looking at it, right? So I think that's the really scary part, is if there's lines down and we start to re-energize. So that's my most terrifying thought through this event and through this storm, is if this happened to anyone that was near power lines. So we are continuing to ask people to stay clear of them as much as they, you know, we don't want them anywhere near them, and our crews are trying to get in and clean up as quickly as they can in all the communities as they re-energize.
That's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
Julianne LaCachera, Radio Canada.
Hi, good afternoon to everybody. My question is for Kim Griffin. Kim, I would like to know, like, you did a lot of assessment for the past few days. Do you have roughly an idea, a target about, like, all of the islanders will get the power back? Did you set up, like, a day, a target goal in your mind?
Bonjour, je ne parle pas français. I apologize. I wish I could speak French. I apologize in advance. I would love to say the powers today would be my goal, but that is not going to happen. And I think that the assessment, to answer your question specifically, that we focused on was the piece on the transmission, but finding out how many power poles were down across P.E.I. So that was a key component of the work that we did, and the crews have their assignments in each of their territories and their areas to get the power back on as best as they can and as quickly and safely as they can. So what I've committed to is a day-to-day update, or a daily update at minimum, to provide the update on our progress. And over the next couple of days, I sure hope I may be in a position to talk about a little more on restoration. But sometimes we're getting there and things are taking a little longer than we thought when we get there. So I am committing to a daily update.
Many people are running to the stores to buy generators. Can you say to them, like, you don't need to run to stores, power will arrive soon, or maybe, yes, it's a good plan to buy one?
Oh, thank you for that. No, I can't even keep them off the road. So I'm not sure what I would say other than we are encouraging, where possible, that the local shelters and communities remain open. The largest concern, in addition, of course, to having fuel and or having food, is the charging of electronics and devices from our customers. We're hearing that from a lot of people. We've become so much more reliant on technology. That's probably the number one complaint. I remember the first storms I ever did, people used to put on their wood stove and say, it's okay, I'm Hardy, get back to me when you can. And now it's, I only have 5 hours of battery left and you're in trouble. So, and I completely respect that. I don't have a generator. I don't have power. I don't think I'd answer about whether you should get one or not. But I think that for our islanders, I think if you can reach out on the local side to your neighbor or your friend to A, make sure they're okay, but B, if they have power, to try and continue that generosity that we've seen in other storms where people help each other out, as well as at the municipal and town and community level to help each other out, whether it be at the fire hall or a local area together.
My last question for you will be, you said 99 crews today, 127 tomorrow. Do you will continue to increase the crews in the next few days, or you will reach a point like 150, 200? What's going to be the maximum? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, that's a good point. We met late last night talking about that and talking about, what's a realistic assessment as people are working, 12 and 16-hour days. How does that look in the restoration efforts? So we're working on a number by tomorrow that I can give you a better update on that in terms of whether we need another 15 crews for power line technicians and utility arborists or not. But we're just finalizing that number now, but I'd be happy to share that tomorrow.
Great. Thanks so much.
Merci.
You're welcome.
According to Catherine, with Tanya.
I have a question for Kim. I'm just looking at our numbers. So you said around 62,000 customers, without power, down from, I believe it was like 84,000 or so. In that same time, we've seen Nova Scotia move from 400,000 plus customers down to 132,000 customers, still without power. I wondered, what are the biggest areas of issue, or what are the biggest contributors that are causing us to kind of slowly trickle back into having power in that time?
Okay. Well, I mean, no storm is alike and no impact is alike. And, up until the last couple of days or so, we were even thinking on P.E.I. that all areas were, everybody was hit, which they were. But, we're certainly noticing on the operation side that The west doesn't seem to have the same impact on PEI from the poles and wires and trees perspective that we're seeing in Central District as well as in Eastern PEI. So that's kind of interesting. In terms of other utilities, it's really hard for me to comment or compare us, or, you know, my heart goes out to them that, you know, if they've done great work and been able to restore power, or, you know, anyone that's still without power. And I'm just not sure of how their system, like what they focused on or what the impacts were. But then secondly, I'm not sure what they're reporting on. Like, you can report on all transmissions on, but it doesn't mean that, like, you can energize all the transmission, for example, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're right down to the feeder. On PEI, I talk right down to the feeder, so right down to your road. I'm not sure how they talk, but that's how I talk, because if we've got our big substations on, but you're sitting at home and you don't have it on, it's hard for you to really get what's going on, and maybe it's a different experience. I like to talk right down to the road, so I'm not sure how they talk about it, or if they have that impact. In terms of our outage map, once again, I do apologize. We've been doing some work on that, but the thing is that we've rerouted power in a lot of communities. I don't know if you remember MacGyver, or I say jerry-rigger or jerry-rig it, and the engineers go crazy. But, you know, what I say is, so that people understand what we're speaking of, is there's times where we are rerouting power, and so the way we set up our outage map is a different route. So you could be sitting on Pine Drive or Blooming Point, my hometown, and say, my gosh, the outage map is showing that you're on but you're off, and that's because we've rerouted and we haven't gone back and changed the map. So I hope I've answered your question. I'm doing the best I can on that, and I get where you're coming from, but that's the best answer I have.
I just add to that.
Sure, my question was more or less like, what are the a little bit bigger contributing factors to our power outages? You know, is it the fact that we have so many trees down, is it the lack of crews, is it a lack of supplies, right? Like, do we still have poles on the way, or still waiting on those, kind of that kind of stuff?
Let me jump in first. Okay. I guess first and foremost, and good point clarifying on that. I appreciate that. I mean, it's absolutely thousands of trees that have come down on our line in our system, much like it's coming down on people's houses, in their yards, you know, the clear devastation across PEI. So that for us has been the absolute number one contributor, is beautiful old trees coming down and knocking down our system lines. And in some cases, we have about, as I said, 350 poles that are down. So that's been the number one issue. We have more crews than we've ever had before, and we just have to make sure that you can be in a point where sometimes you have too many resources. So we have to make sure, the industry that we work in, that we are doing the best that we can, but in the safest manner at all times. And so for us, that's what we worry about at night. That's what we think about. So for us, we're going to continue to add crews as we finish our assessment in terms of number of crews that we need. But we have a pretty good indication. We have more than ever before, and they're fully utilized and busy. There's no downtime. And so for those crews, and as well as resources, we did get a couple of tractor trailer loads of poles, and we've been looking for some more sleeves and wires. I think most of those have arrived as of this morning. So, and again, this is all post-Dorian from a checklist that we had to talk about what we learned from chainsaw oil, like others, right? And so we don't have all the answers, but so far we've been able to access everything that we need.
Do we have a prioritization plan in how we are restoring power? Is there places that are prioritized more than other areas of the island? If so, can you kind of give us an answer to how that works?
Sure. I can give you an answer around the largest is the key customers that are essential service or priority focus, and the largest number of customers by area that we can restore. So when you think about it, as we're restoring lines, the last group of customers to come on will be as we send crews to individual outages. So right now, it's the largest pockets by community. There's no community prioritized over another. It's all about how the system works, where the essential service is there a hospital, is there a gas station, is there a grocery store, are we able to supply islanders with what they need at that level? Today I was going through the list of farms, livestock supply stores. That's what we were talking about this morning. We were looking at other critical infrastructure as deemed by the province. So every storm is different and every restoration. So you couple that with how bad's the impact, and we reassign crews or move crews as they're needed, and that's how we're running this storm.
Excellent. Question for the Premier. You mentioned that we're no longer asking people to stay home. However, we have power lines still down across roads. We have trees down across roads. I'm wondering what has changed from yesterday when we said stay home is not safe to today?
Well, I just think we're beginning to make those steps back, Colin, that they say we have to make cautiously. That doesn't mean everybody has to stampede out and run around and do everything. I think we also have to live in the reality of the world we live in, and that not everyone was heeding that advice. Not everyone was staying at home. And we do have to understand that people have been locked up for 2 years with COVID, and we have to allow them to begin to move around. And as I said yesterday, if you need food, or if you need water, if you need other items, then you have to move out to look after yourself and your family. What we continue to ask people to do is to be careful, is to be mindful, is to be understanding. If there's a crew working down a road, don't drive by the road. For example, give some space, give some time to use some common sense, which all islanders have and are able to exhibit and have exhibited for a number of these different crises. But, the hardest part of this getting back is making the first few steps, and people are prepared to make those steps. If you're not, you should stay home and be a little more patient with yourself, and we'll be understanding with that as well. But human nature being what it is, we have to start to turn into recovery, into rebuilding, and to make the steps forward, and that's what we've been saying for the last day.
And last question, one of my colleagues' mothers tried to call a long-term care home to give an update on their husband who was in there, but they could not get through that home through the landline. I'm wondering, what does the province say to those residents who are lacking just any kind of connection to the basics of communication or those tools that allow them to do that?
Yeah, I certainly feel for everyone and anyone who's in that situation. That's one of the challenges with the devastation that we've dealt with and we're trying to recover from, is that the things we used to take for granted we're not able to do. We're trying the best we can to get reestablished the links with everybody. We don't want that to be the case, but unfortunately that's the reality we're in. I know we're trying through our cabinet committees and other efforts to make sure all of those individuals are looked after and all of the issues that we can are addressed. And I would just say that my heart goes out to them. We're trying hard to make sure that this can be put behind us as quickly as possible, and I would continue to ask for the good nature and the patience and understanding of islanders as we work through this. We've been hit with quite a mess here, and it's in the very early days of making our way back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Campbell, CBC.
Hi, thank you. Mr. Premier, I felt a bit punch drunk for a while there listening to all the challenges you listed off of P.E.I.'s primary industries, but I think I mostly want to ask questions about just vulnerable islanders and if anything's being done to try to check in on them. We had a gentleman call into one of our radio shows late yesterday, said he was a resident of a seniors housing complex, that they were living in the dark because no one had any light source after the sun went down. They had run out of food. I'm pretty sure someone brought them sandwiches, but we're talking about elderly people with limited mobility, whether or not they're in a government housing complex. I just wonder, can you describe, is there any effort trying to be made, through government agencies to look in and make sure that people are okay?
Yeah, and I respect, Kerry, the punch drunk reference, because we are trying to throw a lot out here in a short time. Yesterday in our briefing, we talked about our efforts to work through health to work with home care and to deal with those vulnerable islanders, people who are out there in need. And part of the process would include those who live at Duvar Court and other as well. It can be a painstaking process. We don't want individuals to be living without the necessities, particularly those who are most vulnerable. So we're working hard to address that. And I was made aware of that individual. And sometimes, as we're going through the process to learn about this, the more we hear about it, the more quickly we can be dealing and finding solutions for that. So, but where there is an extensive process underway to try to get in touch with those vulnerable islanders and seniors, those living at home, those requiring home care, oxygen, etc. And we've been working through that since Sunday morning.
Okay, and I don't know if there's, if you can speak to, how far along we are in terms of trying to connect with all those folks. The other thing I just want to throw out there is the forecast is calling for things to get pretty chilly come Thursday night into single digits. I'm not a doctor, but I follow him on Twitter, and he said under 12 degrees, you can start talking about the risk of hypothermia. Again, we're talking about people that are not necessarily mobile to get to the warming shelters during the day, and I don't know about night. Is there any talk about, support for people when those colder temperatures hit?
Yeah, I mean, part of what we've been trying to deal with, and some of the questions from your colleagues in the media about how fast can we get power, the race is really against ourselves, and the race is against the weather and Mother Nature, along with all of the impediments that the Maritime Electric crews are facing in their rebuild. But, we have our warming stations, we have our locations across P.E.I. where we're trying to get people to gather. I mean, one of the things about hurricane season is not long past hurricane season, you get into weather in the fall and colder, and then there are people, 61,000 people right now without electricity and likely without a source of heat. So that's part of the race we're working on. Our social committee, our social cabinet committee is working to address some of these challenges, knowing that the colder weather is coming. We watch the weather as well, and we know that we're going to try to do everything we can to find some space for those who may need it and to address as many of those in need as possible.
I wonder if you can provide any update in terms of injuries, fatalities. I know we got a little information on Sunday, but I don't know if we ever had all the details around the death related to generator use. Anything else like that? Any injuries related to cleanup or, falls from people trying to clear off the roof, things like that? Anything you can tell us that?
To date, to me, nothing has been reported in that regard, Carrie, in terms of the information that was shared the other day. I don't know if that has been confirmed yet in a formal process. But as of now, nothing since then that we're aware of. I'm sure there's been a few mishaps along the way as we go through this cleanup, but none that have been reported to the level where they would get to my desk or our cabinet committee at this point, thankfully, and we're grateful for that.
All right, one last question, if I could. I just wonder, kind of thinking about the boil water advisory that was issued for Georgetown as they brought their water system back online. Have there been any public health concerns, outages, maybe with sewage treatment, or, we haven't heard of any?
So far, 4 or 5 days in, this is the first crisis I've dealt with where I haven't dealt with public health. So I haven't yet received anything on that. I was aware of the boil order issue for Georgetown as they, reignited their system. But as of that, I haven't heard anything yet, but I'm sure we'll be getting a brief from public health in the days ahead, or if anything becomes of an urgent nature. But there's nothing yet that has been funneled up through the line to the cabinet table or to my desk as of this point. And I haven't talked to Dr. Morrison for 4 days. So.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Carolyn Ryan, CBC.
Good afternoon. A couple of questions. First, have officials received any complaints about price gouging so far with essential items such as, generators, chainsaws, batteries, or people reselling things at high prices on social media sites?
So I'll take that, I guess. We haven't heard of anything. If it's happening, we haven't been advised on that. I think what I'm seeing more so are retailers and community organizations kind of stepping up and offering stuff at no charge. You know, we've been hearing about stories where people have said, here, I don't need this item anymore, but you need it, so here I'm passing it along the chain. So I'm hearing more gratitude gifts than as opposed to interest for kind of that self-profit. So I haven't heard of anything through our EMO office.
That is lovely to hear.
Isn't it? Isn't it?
Another question, this one for the Premier about the wage rebate program. Do businesses have to prove that they did in fact close in order to qualify for the, is it 2 weeks that's being covered?
Yeah, there'll be a 2-week span that we'll cover here initially. I mean, we're very hopeful we can get back to some kind of normal as quickly as possible, but I don't think anyone would have to prove that they weren't operating on Sunday or Monday, we have obligations to the Auditor General and to the taxpayers of P.E.I. to make sure the funds are being used properly, and we know they will be. So the system to get money into the hands of individuals as quickly as possible will be as nimble as possible, but I mean, there will be some basic requirements needed to make sure that the money is going to those who need it.
Okay, another one. We're hearing of major damage to dairy farms. I think yesterday one of the farmers who was speaking to Matt Rainey said his barn went down, his son's barn went down, a total of 7 that he knew of alone. Are you expecting, A, whether, do you know have any sense of how many dairy cows have been lost? And B, whether there might be interruptions in the milk supply chain in the weeks ahead?
I don't have a number of animals that have been lost as of yet. I know the Minister of Agriculture will be briefed on that, but by my count, at least, Carol, I think there were 10 burns that have been impacted in some way, shape, or form. The way our dairy business is operated, I think they might have some contingencies built in to maintain a level supply. That might be a question better directed to Chad Mann or someone at ADL, for example. But anytime there's impact into an industry or a sector like that, there's bound to be some hiccups along the way. I think the big concern right now, along with those you address, would be how do we make our way through this? I'm sure there are neighbors helping others trying to do the milking and things like that. But losing 10 dairy burns is a big hit for that industry. And when as I talked to the Prime Minister today about the other losses in agriculture, it's been an industry that's the most resilient you'd ever run into has been hit hard again.
Indeed, it has. Another question here. This is for your Kim Griffin. Any thoughts in the future about encouraging P.E.I. houses and new home builds in particular to become more resilient by having buried underground connections from the main lines?
Oh, that's a good point. We certainly hear and are asked that question quite often about underground power lines. And you'll see across P.E.I. there are some subdivisions and different areas that have the underground lines. It's just the pricing differential between underground versus the structures that you see across the island right now. I don't have the exact number in terms of the differential. I think it's about 8 times to 12 times more expensive, but I could confirm that number specifically. So it's basically been more of a cost issue. We're actually doing a climate change vulnerability assessment right now that we're looking out for the next 30 to 50 years in partnership with the province to actually take a look at that in terms of system hardiness and what we should be doing across our system, and kind of a low, medium, and high. What should that look like? So that's certainly something that we're looking at from a costing perspective, but also just from a climate change perspective as well.
Carolyn, I could just add that one of the things the Prime Minister and I talked about briefly today was the fact that events like we had on the weekend used to be once in a century, and now they're more than that. And part of our plan going forward with climate change and adaptation will be the federal government, the provincial government will have to work more closely with our utilities to try to look for options such as that, because this would seem to be, because of the changing climate and everything else, something that we're more likely to be dealing with more regularly than perhaps we had in the past. So, you know, there is a cost, a significant cost that goes with that. But as we talked about just briefly, the cost that we're incurring here is large too. So we have to find a way to meet this in the middle somewhere and begin the process to look at options such as that. But I appreciate you raising it. It's a good point.
You remember
I
how...
promise this is the last one.
Okay, sorry, I was just going to comment on ice storm.
Sorry, I was interrupted somebody?
No, I just said to the Premier that, you know, if you recall the ice storms, if you look back historically how farmers and neighbors and islanders were helping each other, from that perspective, it was really ice storm related and snow related, and some of the things that we're seeing is more high winds and these types of events that are probably going to impact us even harder in the future, so.
For sure. One last question, and you may not have an answer to this, but there was a missing man in Little Sands that the RCMP tweeted about on Sunday, yesterday, saying he hadn't been seen since September 25th. Do you have any idea whether that is storm-related? And if not, we can try to make some more calls, but wondered if you'd heard that.
I haven't, Carolyn, but I think I would take this offline quickly and talk to Tanya and some of her officials at the table to find a little bit more about that. That's disturbing to hear, so we'll endeavor to find out more about that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rachel Collier, The Graphic.
Hey there. I hope you can see my cell service has been in and out here. Yeah, I guess my question was also related to underground power lines, which you pretty much answered. So I guess I'll just move on. You mentioned 350 poles were affected. I think I just quickly Googled, and in Dorian there was 97 poles down, and it cost about $3 million to repair. I'm curious if you have any estimates of how much repairing all those power lines will cost.
I don't at this point. You know, the ice storm before that was, I think, 400 poles. So I do have information from past storms, but in terms of our restoration efforts at this point from Fiona, I don't have a number yet, but I will.
Okay, right on. Yeah, I guess since you're talking about the potential of getting sort of underground power lines, I'm curious if there's any, I guess, Premier King, like if you have any sort of goals for that moving forward or anything concrete?
Well, I mean, I guess my overarching goal would be never have to deal with what we're dealing with again, and anything we can be doing to help with that, we would like to look at. I mean, you know, I've been saying, I was elected in 2019, I've been saying since the very beginning that you don't need to tell islanders about climate change or whether or not it's real, and we deal with it every day. And we've tried to be one of the leaders in that regard in terms of our adaptation and moving off of our reliance of fossil fuels, and that continues. And I think one of the next steps, kind of in many regards, the white whale of climate change adaptation are things like we're talking about. How do we change everything, how we've done it, and implement systems that get us off of how we've done it before? And that's a big challenge. But I mean, I'd be very open to working with our utility, with our federal government. I mean, we have the P.E.I. Climate Change and Adaptation Center could be helpful in getting things like this initiated and figured out. So I mean, I think I would be very open to trying to make these investments, but knowing that it will take a considerable amount of time and money to have every line in Prince Edward Island under the ground. I mean, that's fair to say, but you know, I mean, we could begin with a step and keep going there, but I'd be open-minded to all that and to work closely with our utility, because it would have to be done hand in hand, and we'd have to work together on it.
I think it's important to note that there are some here.
Yeah, keep going.
I just wanted to mention that some restoration times in underground takes a lot longer too. So it's kind of a balancing act. I think that's one of the things, as the Premier said, it's kind of a long-term look. But, I think that would be something that, we'd have to really look at a long-term plan on that, because some places it does take a lot longer when it's underground, and you just have to be really careful with that too and weigh that out to try to source the issue on the underground system. So not opposed to it, just I think it's part of the planning discussion. Is important to note.
Yeah, I'm curious, what has made it feasible in some areas compared to others? What has gone into making that possible in some areas on P.E.I.?
Mm-hmm. Some areas it's visual, or it's a developer or a homeowner organization that aesthetically they want to make sure that it's underground, so they're willing to pay the additional fees and costs to do that, and so that's been more of a cosmetic or a personal choice, and sometimes it's a vista discussion as well from the scenic view perspective. So right now that's where it is on Prince Edward Island.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you, Rachel.
Joey Black here.
You there, Joe?
Hello?
You there, Joe?
I'm here,
Okay.
I'm here, Dennis, you there?
I'm here. What's going on, buddy?
Okay, got a couple of questions for you. How can the province keep cell service coverage so it doesn't go down again?
Yeah, I think, Joe, we've talked a lot about that over the last few days, and as Islanders become more and more reliant on cell phone coverage, we have to continue to make the investments in the infrastructure and to make sure that infrastructure is able to operate when we have episodes and events like we've had here. So it just, it's the technology continues to improve, and we'll work closely with the telecoms to make sure we have the best technology here and continue to try to work to have the best cell coverage we can. Islanders are relying on it.
And I've got another one here for you. Can you give us an update on cleanup efforts that the province has undertaken and where you are now?
I think Minister Deagle was out today explaining sort of the process with that as it comes to the removal of debris and what we're trying to do with our Waste Watch partners and our municipal and community partners. The cleanup from a Maritime Electric perspective, Kim and others have been trying to keep everyone up to date on. It's slow and steady progress, which is great. We're moving forward. And, but we got a big, as we talked about yesterday, Joe, we got a big cleanup ahead of us here, and it's going to take some time.
Okay. Either yourself or Dan, you can answer this one maybe. Can you give us an update on the donations from that Red Cross relief?
So we don't actually administer the Red Cross appeal for Fiona. That's a Red Cross-led initiative, certainly supported by us. I did reach out to them this morning just to get an understanding of where they were with it and to get a better understanding of where the process of, as they do make those collections, how that distribution will occur. So that's probably something I could follow up with maybe tomorrow and provide some more details on that.
Okay, I've got another one for you, Kim. If people see down power lines, how can they go report them or make their way around them without going over them? If you see a down power line.
So I hope you can hear me okay. That's a good question on the down power line perspective. So our contact center has been open around the clock, and what we're asking Islanders to do is if they see a downed power line, to phone our 1-800-670-1012 number They can also report it on our website as well. The reason we're asking people to phone is because we may have additional questions, or it could have already been reported. So we actually feed that live into our system. And then our crews are each given a list in East, West, and Central that breaks down and prioritizes. So, for example, if it's emergency, if they need to get to it, and we send a crew there to do that assessment. So that being said, you can imagine with the number of lines down, the number of reports that we've had, but that's been part of our early days, some of the work that we've been doing. So the crews now have been really focusing on making sure they're getting in there and either removing those lines and restoring power, as you know, but also trying to get to every single place. And that's been part of the efforts as we begin to restore power. So we are asking customers to continue to do that and call us on that number if they can.
Have you heard of any, has your crew heard of any horses or cattle being impacted with the outage?
Horses?
I have not. I could check with our contact center to see if there's been any reports. I don't have any reports on that specifically. I would like to think I would have known that, but I can double check on that. If you would like me to do so, I can do that.
Yeah, that'd be great. It would be nice to know, because I think I heard a few other reporters mention that.
Okay.
And how have you been? Have you gotten anywhere in or around Oyster Bed power restored yet? Or nearby areas?
I'm not sure if Oyster Bed is partial restoration or not, but I can check, and I'll get your contact information on that and give you those two questions and answer those offline if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks, Joe. Stay safe, buddy.
Thanks. You too.
See you, bud.
You know.
That's all the questions we have for today.
Thank you very much, everyone. Kim, Tanya, and all Islanders. We'll touch base tomorrow or sooner. So thank you.